Welcome to the world of trains. Today we're going to ride in the cab of a 1911 Baldwin 462 steam locomotive. Railroading has played an important part in American history, and the little part of the railroading history is preserved here at the Texas State Railroad in Rusk, Texas. It's early morning when the engine pulls out of the engine house. The fireman checks the position of all valves. We will be riding in the cab, so you don't need a ticket. Just hold on tight as we chug down the rails and through the history of the Texas State Railroad.
The first thing you notice as you climb into the cab is a feeling of power waiting to be unleashed. The tremendous roar and vibration exhilarate the soul. Your body knows something exciting is about to happen. Directed by the brakeman, the massive locomotive backs up to be delicately hooked to the waiting coaches. The train stops at the nearby station. A whistle blast alerts waiting passengers that their train has arrived. As the passengers board, we have a chance to visit with the crew. With the ring of a bell and the toot of a whistle, the engineer skillfully unleashes the steam power from inside the boiler. As power is transferred to the wheels, the massive engine eases forward. With the experience of years at the controls, the engineer masterfully pulls out of the station. The fireman sits ready at his control. With all aboard, we're rolling down the rails to Palestine. An adjustment of the controls, and the engineer moves his iron steed into a trot. The boiler is at full power as we build up speed. Lumbering from side to side, the motion of the locomotive seems very much like the gallop of a horse. Now grab hold of something as we get up to speed inside the cab of this 1911 Baldwin steam locomotive. We'll be back with more of our ride on the Texas State Railroad. But now, let's visit the engine house, where we recorded our Baldwin steam locomotive being serviced earlier.
locomotive backs into the engine house, the sound of its power is deafening. It takes more than a casual look to check out under here. With a hammer and trained ear, the engine crew checks out the under chassis for any nuts or bolts that have worked loose. An engine house crewman goes to work lubing the drive gear as the careful inspection continues underneath. It sure takes a lot of grease to replace what was lost during the last run. The firemen assist the engine house crewman in completing the service of his locomotive. The crewman makes sure each bushing gets enough grease as he continues preparing the steam engine for its next haul down the Texas State Railroad.
Being complicated machines, it's only through attentive care and maintenance between runs that steam engines operate efficiently and safely. I'm sure that's the major reason few are still in operation today. This 1911 Baldwin 462 is one of the few remaining steam locomotives operating on a daily basis. Another reason for the change to diesel from steam, we are finding out, is that it takes a lot of attentive care from the engineer and fireman when operating steam engines. pass an old round table, yet another link in the demise of steam. Although the train does not make a stop at Maydale, the highway between Rusk and Palestine gives easy access to this relic from steam's golden age. The Texas State Railroad used it when a bridge washout prevented the run-through to Palestine. It's a nice little prototype you modelers may find a place for on your layout. The history of the Texas State Railroad began in the 1890s, when funding was obtained through bond sales and state appropriations for a railroad to service an iron furnace and other industries which were part of the state penitentiary system, located near Rusk, Texas. Construction on the railroad began in 1896. In 1913, the iron plant at Rusk closed, and the furnace was sold. The prison was converted to a mental hospital soon afterwards. The railroad continued to operate under the control of the governor and prison authority. In 1921, the right-of-way was leased to the Texas-New Orleans Railroad, which became the Southern Pacific. The lease was transferred to the Southeastern Railroad in 1960 until freight operations were terminated on December 31st, 1969. The Missouri Pacific Railroad presently leases 3.69 miles of the original Texas State Railroad to service industries near Palestine, Texas. Today, the railroad is operated by the Texas Park and Wildlife Department, and a major part of the operation is the restoration of steam locomotives.
One of the important functions of the museum here at Rusk, Texas, is the preservation of steam locomotives. Here, the engine house crew continues the restoration of this 1917 Baldwin 282. The Baldwin Locomotive Company of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania began building steam engines in the early 1830s. By 1835, the company employed over 300 men. With the development of a few important innovations in the design of steam engines, the Baldwin Company became a major producer of steam locomotives, building over 75,000 units before production stopped in 1955, with the last Baldwin engine produced going to India. Like the men who, over 100 years ago, originally built Baldwin steam engines, the Texas State Railroad engine house crew brings together each meticulously restored part, giving life to this magnificent machine. With handles polished bright, gauges restored to like-new condition, updated diesel modifications allowing use of available fuel supplies, and a new firebox waiting for its first firing, this 1917 Baldwin steam locomotive will provide years of service when it is put back onto the tracks in the near future. And in the yard awaits the engine house crew's next project.
Even though steam has lost its place in the railroading industry, it will always have a place here in the heart of Texas, thanks to all the dedicated railroad enthusiasts who made the Texas State Railroad Museum possible. In 1972, the Texas State Railroad was conveyed to the Texas Park and Wildlife Department for the creation of a state historical park dedicated to the preservation of steam locomotives and railroading's golden age. Park services offer a train ride over 25 miles of track through rolling hills and piney woods between Rusk and Palestine, Texas. one-way ride takes 90 minutes, and there's a 1-hour layover before the return trip, a total of 4 hours. Reservations are recommended and can be booked well in advance. Picnic facilities and boardings at both stations, and the park at Rusk offers overnight camping.
Thank you for joining us as we look into the world of trains. We hope you have enjoyed this journey into the history of railroading on the Texas State Railroad. There is something exciting about powerful locomotives that demands our attention. Being able to recognize diesel locomotives like classic automobiles, to know the manufacturer, how much horsepower is under the hood, and production dates is exactly what millions of people do as a fun hobby. On this program, we will be spotting diesels from 3 of the country's oldest railroad companies. The Illinois Central Railroad was chartered in 1851. In 1856, the route from Chicago to Cairo, Illinois was completed, earning the railroad a 2.5 million acre government land grant. The Illinois Central was the first of many railroads to receive such a grant. During expansion, Illinois Central absorbed over 100 smaller railroads. Operating in 13 states, Illinois Central extended from Chicago in the north to New Orleans and other Gulf ports in the south, west to Kansas City and Omaha, and east to Indianapolis and Louisville. In 1972, Illinois Central Railroad merged with the Gulf, Mobile, and Ohio Railroad, forming the Illinois Central Gulf Railroad. It's helpful when spotting diesels to use a reference source. Much of the information in this program comes from the compact book, The Contemporary Diesel Spotter's Guide. All of the locomotives shown on this program were manufactured by Electromotive Division of General Motors Corporation, EMD. Number 1466, an SW14, is a 1,200 horsepower unit riding on two four-wheel trucks. '8718 is a GP11. The GP11 is an 1,850 horsepower locomotive with two four-wheel trucks. Number 3107, a GP40A, number 8395, a GP11, and number 3121, another GP40A, pull a long freight heading out of town. With 3,000 horsepowers each, these GP40As have more than enough pull to handle most any load. A pair of GP11s work the Baton Rouge yard. IC lists 54 GP11s acquired between 1972 and 1979. The GP11 was produced through Illinois Central's Capital Rebuild Program at the Paducah, Kentucky shops from older units that were either worn out or wrecked, using updated engines, electronics, and completely reworked cabs. GP11 road numbers run from 8301 to 8753 on the IC line. Here, an SW14 stands ready as the twin GP11s move further into the yard. IC lists a total of 117 SW14s with road numbers running from 0050 to 1511. The 1,200 horsepower SW14 units were purchased between 1973 and 1982. Between 1978 and 1982, Illinois Central mass-produced SW14s from older 1,000 horsepower NW2s, 1,200 horsepower SW7s, and SW9s at the Paducah, Kentucky shop. The rebuild included new engines and a new cab with an angular roof. SW-14s are dispersed throughout the IC system. Let's go into the yard tower for a view from above.
About 3 feet. That's it. All right, stretch now, Charles, stretch.
Say, Clyde, he's at 12:20, he'll be away. All righty? Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Charles, come on here, Charles, 12 cars. It's pretty cool. Join on hold there, and I'm going to come here about 12.
We watch as an SW-14 and a GP-11 pass underneath the tower.
Once this, my engine gets off and Taylor comes out and switches lead, LMA will be coming out at 10 to 2.
5 more, Charles, 5 cars.
Just temporary repair. The air brakes are operated off the engine.
We get a good view of the engine facility from up here, as well as up the line.
1. I have.
We spot an SW-14 and 2 GP-11s in the engine facility.
I'll switch his crew down there.
And look here, a KCS switcher pulls into the IC yard to transfer some rolling stock to the nearby Kansas City Southern yard.
Up the head, 2 of them, Charles.
From the IC tower, we go to the KCS tower.
1 car, 1. Half of it.
If you look carefully, you can see a train pulling into the north end of the yard.
10 feet. That's it. All right, stretch a little bit. Stretch just a little bit.
Computers and video cameras are used to monitor and record the action at the far end of the yard.
I'll give me a minute. I need to put a brake on this. Okay. All right, come easy on ahead, Charles. I got to cut. Right about 4 to 7.
The Kansas City Southern, originally founded in the mid-1880s as the Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Gulf, was built to service the Midwest farmers, with rails extending into Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. The Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Gulf constructed 1/4 of all mileage built in this country in 1895. Even with the aid of George M. Pullman of sleeping car fame, who provided the KCP&G with funds and equipment, the railroad went bankrupt in the 1890s. It was at this time that John W. Gates took over the line and renamed it the Kansas City Southern. A switcher passes by the tower.
About 30 feet. 10 feet. That's it. All right, stretch a little bit. Stretch just a little bit. There you got them all. All right, a couple on two there. All right, give me a minute. I need to put a brake on this. Okay. All right, come easy on ahead, Charles. I got the cut. Right by four to the cover. Two, Charles. One. I have. I heard it.
I'll switch in the crew down there.
.4324 is an SW1500. The SW1500 was introduced in 1966.
I come ahead about 3 feet.
The SW1500, with its 1,500 horsepower rating, was more than just a yard switcher. Many railroads use the SW1500 for road switching chores. Standard equipment included a 600-gallon fuel tank, but most SW1500s were equipped with the optional 1,100-gallon tanks, and more than half of all SW1500s had flexi-coil trucks suitable for speeds up to 60 miles per hour. Production of the SW1500 ended in 1974 when EMD introduced the MP15. KCS lists 42 SW1500s acquired between 1966 and 1971. An SD40-2 sits in the engine facility of the KCS yard. This SW1500 is a 1,500 horsepower unit and rides on two four-wheel trucks. On the KCS line, SW1500 road numbers run from 4320 to 4362. Obviously, this pair of SW1500s have been recently overhauled. 4365, an MP-15, sits nearby with a booster unit attached. Later in the day, we catch the engineer checking out his locomotive. Much like an airplane pilot doing a pre-flight inspection, he checks every detail before climbing on board. The big SD-40-2 moves out of the engine facility, followed by a GP-38-2 and an SW-1500. The road numbers of the SD-40-2s run from 637 to 692 on the KCS line. The SD-40-2 is a 3,000 horsepower unit and rides on two six-wheel trucks. .4365 also moves into action. The MP-15 is a 1,500 horsepower locomotive riding on two four-wheel trucks. The MP-15 was introduced in 1974 as the follow-up to the successful SW-1500. MP stands for multi-purpose. The MP-15 was designed to meet customer demands for a switcher, which is as much a road switcher as it is an efficient yard switcher. MP-1500s are equipped with a 1,400-gallon fuel tank and has a maximum rated speed of 65 miles per hour. Road numbers run from 4363 to 4366 for the MP-15s, and KCS lists 4 in service since 1975. General Motors began to market standard diesel switchers and passenger engines through its subsidiaries, Electromotive Corporation and Wenton Engine Company, in 1935. In 1939, the first mass production road freight diesel, EMC Model FT, was introduced and continued as the only U.S. freight diesel in production until 1945. EMC and Wenton were merged by GM January 1st of 1941 and became the Electromotive division of General Motors Corporation. The engineer of the lead locomotive climbs down to check all connections on all 3 engines to make sure everything is in order. Production of the SD40-2 began in 1972, with over 3,000 units being built before production stopped in 1988. KCS lists 56 SD40-2s in service. The SD40-2 was practically the standard locomotive of the late 70s and early 80s, favored over the more powerful SD45s because of low maintenance expense. Engine number 4010 is a GP38-2. KCS has 22 of these powerful locomotives in service, the first acquired in 1973. On the KCS, the GP38-2 road numbers run from 4000 to 4021. Engine number 4362 is an SW1500. With clearance from the tower, the three engines head off to work. The last engines we will look at on this program work out of the Union Pacific Yard in Addis, Louisiana. Number 1810 and number 2086 are both GP38-2s. The Union Pacific Railroad was incorporated by an act of Congress on July 1st, 1862, with the intent of expanding the American railway system to the Pacific coast. Building westward 1,000 miles from Omaha, Nebraska, the Union Pacific met the Central Pacific at Promontory, Utah on May 10, 1869, completing the transcontinental railway system. In 1982, the UP merged with the Missouri Pacific and the Western Pacific to form the Union Pacific system. The 2,000 horsepower GP38-2 units ride on two four-wheel trucks. Produced from 1972 until present, over 1,800 GP38-2s have been built. Road numbers for the GP38-2 on the Union Pacific run from 2000 to 2334, and they list 320 in service. This GP38-2, numbered 1810, is not listed in the James W. Kerr 1989 locomotive roster, so it is quite possible that there are more than 320 in UP service at present. We hope you've enjoyed spotting diesels with us. It's a lot of fun and something you can do in your own area of the country. Spotting diesels is something the entire family can enjoy, a hobby that gives new meaning to the Sunday drive. Be sure to join us again when we look into the world of Tring.